At the meeting, no one understood the Japanese millionaire in the midst of the sudden crisis, until the janitor's daughter walked in and spoke perfect Japanese. Executives froze at the impossible scene, and everyone discovered that the fate of billions was saved by a child. Catherine Morgan stepped into the glass-walled boardroom of Apex Innovations, her Louboutins clicking authoritatively against the marble floor. As CEO of Morgan Global Investments, she commanded attention with every gesture. The weight of responsibility rested heavily on her shoulders. This merger represented the most significant deal of the quarter, perhaps of the entire fiscal year. 14 hours of flight time from Milan to New York, coupled with back-to-back meetings across 3 time zones, had taken their toll. Catherine had barely slept, subsisting on black coffee and sheer determination. Still, she maintained her composure as she greeted the Apex executives with a practiced smile. "Ms. Morgan, we're delighted to finally bring this negotiation to a close," said Richard Townsend, Apex's silver-haired CEO. "My team has reviewed the final terms, and we believe we're positioned for mutual success." Catherine nodded, arranging her documents with precision. The conference room overlooked Manhattan's skyline, the afternoon sun casting long shadows across the table. She had negotiated countless deals in rooms just like this one, yet today felt different. A subtle tightness gripped her chest as she began her presentation. "As outlined in Section 3 of our proposal." Her voice faltered slightly. The words on the page seemed to swim before her eyes. The tightness in her chest intensified, spreading like wildfire. Catherine reached for her water glass, but her hand trembled visibly. Sweat beaded along her hairline despite the room's aggressive air conditioning. Suddenly, the pressure became unbearable. Sharp pain radiated through her chest, her breathing shallow and rapid. Words failed her as Italian phrases, her grandmother's native tongue, tumbled unbidden from her lips. "Mi serve aria, non riesco a respirare." The panic attack had stripped away her English, leaving only the language of her childhood. The Apex executives exchanged alarmed glances. Richard half rose from his seat, uncertain whether to call for help or give her space. The atmosphere in the room transformed from professional anticipation to uncomfortable concern. "Should we call an ambulance?" someone whispered. Catherine's vision tunneled, the room spinning around her. Through the fog of panic, she heard the boardroom door open. A small figure entered, a girl, no more than 7 years old, with unruly curls and bright, intelligent eyes. She wore a simple dress and carried a worn backpack covered in cartoon characters. Without hesitation, she walked straight to Catherine's side. "Respiri profondamente, signora," the child said in flawless Italian. "Lentamente, con me." Astonished, Catherine found herself following the girl's instructions, breathing deeply as tiny hands guided her own to rest on the table. "È solo ansia," the child continued calmly. "Troppo caffè, troppo stress, e niente cibo, vero?" Catherine nodded weakly, amazed at the girl's perceptiveness. The child turned to the stunned executives. "She needs water and something to eat," the girl explained in perfect English. "She's having an anxiety attack, too much coffee, too much stress, and she hasn't eaten all day." Richard Townsend snapped into action, ordering his assistant to bring water and food immediately. The child stayed beside Catherine, speaking softly in Italian, guiding her breathing until color returned to her cheeks. "Who are you?" Catherine finally managed in English. "I'm Sophie," the girl replied. "My mum cleans the offices at night. School was cancelled today, so I'm waiting for her shift to start." She shrugged as if her sudden appearance and linguistic abilities were perfectly ordinary. Within minutes, Catherine's symptoms began to subside. The physician who arrived shortly after confirmed Sophie's amateur diagnosis, an anxiety attack complicated by dehydration and low blood sugar. The meeting was postponed, with promises to reconvene when Catherine had recovered. As the room cleared, Catherine's gaze remained fixed on Sophie, who now sat swinging her legs in an oversized boardroom chair, munching contentedly on a sandwich from the executive kitchen. "How do you speak Italian so well?" Catherine asked. Sophie brightened. "I learn languages for fun. Italian, Spanish, a little Mandarin, and I just started Russian. I watch videos and use apps on Mum's old phone." She spoke with the unself-conscious enthusiasm of a child discussing a favorite toy. Before Catherine could respond, a harried-looking woman in a cleaner's uniform burst into the room. "Sophie, I told you to wait in the break room." Her voice carried equal measures of concern and embarrassment. "I'm so sorry, Ms. Morgan. My daughter sometimes—" "Your daughter may have saved my life today," Catherine interrupted. "Or at the very least, saved me from serious embarrassment." The woman, Sarah Bennett, according to her ID badge, appeared uncertain how to respond. Her shoulders remained tense, protective. "I'd like to speak with you about Sophie," Catherine said, her business instincts awakening despite her physical exhaustion. "Her language abilities are extraordinary." Sarah's expression immediately closed. "She's just a kid who likes languages," she said defensively. "We don't need any special attention." Catherine recognized the wariness in Sarah's eyes, the look of someone who had learned to be skeptical of unexpected kindness. In the cutthroat world of corporate America, Catherine had worn that same expression countless times. "Here's my card," Catherine said, writing her personal number on the back. "Please call me. I believe Sophie has exceptional talent that shouldn't go unrecognized." Sarah accepted the card with visible reluctance. "We should go," she said, taking Sophie's hand. "I hope you feel better, Ms. Morgan." As they left, Sophie turned back with a small wave. "Arrivederci, signora. Spero che ti sentirai meglio presto." Catherine watched them go, her mind racing despite her fatigue. In 30 years of business, she had developed an instinct for recognizing talent and potential. That same instinct now told her that Sophie Bennett was extraordinary, a diamond hidden in plain sight. 2 days later, fully recovered, Catherine returned to the Apex building. The merger negotiations had been rescheduled, but her first priority was finding Sophie. After the meeting concluded successfully, she made her way to the building's lower level, where the maintenance staff kept their supplies. Near a row of industrial cleaning carts, Catherine discovered a makeshift study area, a small desk fashioned from an overturned crate, covered with notebooks filled with vocabulary lists in multiple languages. Phonetic guides, grammar charts, and mnemonic drawings filled the pages with a level of organization that would impress university professors. Sarah appeared from a nearby supply room, startled to find one of the building's most important visitors in the maintenance area. "Ms. Morgan, is something wrong with the conference room?" "Everything's perfect," Catherine assured her. "I came to find you and Sophie." Sarah's expression tightened. "She's at after-school care today." "I'd like to help her," Catherine said directly. "Your daughter has a gift that deserves nurturing." "We're doing fine," Sarah replied, her chin lifting slightly. "I appreciate your concern, but we don't need charity." Catherine had anticipated this response. "This isn't charity. It's investment in potential. I recognize exceptional talent when I see it. It's how I've built my career." For several minutes they engaged in a careful dance of offer and resistance. Catherine could see Sarah's internal struggle, the desire to give her daughter opportunities battling against pride and suspicion. "At least let me arrange for an assessment," Catherine suggested. "A proper evaluation by specialists in gifted education, no strings attached." "And then what?" Sarah challenged. "Discover she's special, get our hopes up, and then what? We can't afford private schools or fancy programs." "One step at a time," Catherine countered. "Information first, decisions later." Something in Catherine's persistence finally broke through Sarah's defenses. "I don't want her to become some kind of experiment," she said quietly. "She's still just a little girl." "I promise to respect that," Catherine replied. "Everything at her pace, with your approval each step of the way." Sarah studied Catherine's face, searching for hidden motives. Finally, she nodded once. "The assessment only, then we'll see." Catherine smiled, offering her hand to seal their agreement. In that moment, neither woman could have predicted how this simple handshake would alter both their lives forever. What Catherine didn't mention was how Sophie's flawless Italian had struck a deep personal chord. The language of Catherine's grandmother, the only family member who had shown her unconditional love, coming from this child's lips, had felt like a message from beyond. A reminder of what truly mattered in a life that had become defined by quarterly reports and stock prices. As Catherine left the building, her phone rang. It was her father, Lorenzo Morgan, demanding an update on the Apex merger. Catherine answered with practiced efficiency, giving no indication that she had just set in motion events that would challenge everything he had taught her about success and sacrifice. 3 weeks later, Catherine sat behind a one-way mirror, watching as Sophie completed a series of assessments. The Gifted Children's Institute, occupied a converted brownstone in Manhattan's Upper West Side, its walls adorned with colorful artwork from previous prodigies. Dr. Eleanor Patterson, a renowned specialist in exceptional cognitive development, conducted the evaluation while Catherine observed alongside a nervous Sarah. "I've never seen anything quite like this," Dr. Patterson murmured, making notes as Sophie effortlessly switched between language tasks. The child had already demonstrated proficiency in Italian, Spanish, and conversational Mandarin. Now, after just 30 minutes of exposure to basic Finnish vocabulary, she was constructing simple sentences with proper grammatical structure. "Is this normal?" Sarah asked, her fingers anxiously twisting the strap of her purse. Dr. Patterson smiled gently. "There's nothing normal about your daughter, Mrs. Bennett. She possesses what we call hyper-polyglot abilities, an extreme facility with language acquisition. But it's more than that. Her pattern recognition, working memory, and cognitive flexibility scores are off the charts." Catherine leaned forward, watching as Sophie quickly solved a complex visual puzzle that had been introduced as a challenge for much older children. "What does this mean for her education?" "A standard curriculum would be woefully inadequate," Dr. Patterson explained. "She's already operating at a middle school level in many subjects, despite having received no formal enrichment." She hesitated before continuing. "With the right support, children like Sophie can achieve remarkable things. Without it, they often become frustrated, bored, and eventually disengage from learning altogether." Sarah's face paled. "Her teacher keeps sending notes home, says Sophie doesn't pay attention, that she's always reading books hidden in her desk. Classic signs of understimulation," Dr. Patterson confirmed. "She's seeking challenges the classroom isn't providing." The assessment continued for hours, revealing new dimensions of Sophie's abilities. Beyond languages, she demonstrated exceptional mathematical intuition and remarkable emotional intelligence. When a researcher became flustered after dropping materials, Sophie immediately helped gather the scattered items while offering reassurance in the researcher's native Portuguese, a language she had picked up merely from overhearing a conversation in the hallway. During a break, Catherine stepped outside to take a call from her assistant. The autumn air carried a crisp chill, the leaves in Central Park beginning their colorful transformation. As she handled a minor crisis involving overseas investors, Catherine realized how much lighter she felt despite the professional pressure. Something about Sophie's case had awakened a long-dormant part of herself, the part that remembered there was more to life than balance sheets and boardrooms. When she returned, Dr. Patterson was reviewing the preliminary results with Sarah. "We've conducted a comprehensive IQ assessment," the specialist explained, "though I must emphasize that traditional measures don't fully capture your daughter's unique cognitive profile." "Just tell me what it means," Sarah said, her voice tight with emotion. Sophie's IQ tests above 180, well into the profoundly gifted range. Her linguistic abilities are particularly extraordinary, possibly among the top recorded cases for her age group, but perhaps most remarkable is her emotional maturity. Many profoundly gifted children struggle with social-emotional development, but Sophie shows exceptional empathy and interpersonal awareness. Sarah sat motionless, absorbing the information. "What do we do now?" she finally asked, looking lost. Dr. Patterson presented a customized educational plan: private tutors, university-level language modules, specialized enrichment programs. Catherine listened carefully, mentally calculating the astronomical costs such a program would entail. "There are scholarship opportunities," Dr. Patterson continued, seeming to read Sarah's thoughts. "Full funding is possible, but it would require Sophie's participation in certain research initiatives and academic competitions." Sarah's head snapped up. "You mean making her into a case study, putting her on display?" "Not at all," Dr. Patterson assured her. "The research is unobtrusive, simply documenting her progress and methods. The competitions are voluntary, but they open doors to university partnerships and additional resources." Catherine intervened, sensing Sarah's growing discomfort. "What if we started with something smaller, a modified program, just a few hours weekly, with regular evaluation to ensure Sophie's well-being remains the priority?" Relief flooded Sarah's expression. "That sounds manageable." As they discussed details, Sophie finished her final assessment and joined them, seemingly unfazed by the day's rigorous testing. "Did I do okay?" she asked, climbing onto her mother's lap. "You did amazing, sweetheart," Sarah replied, hugging her close. "Can we get ice cream? You said maybe if I finished everything." The simple, childish request brought smiles to the adults' faces, a reminder that despite her extraordinary mind, Sophie remained a 7-year-old girl with 7-year-old desires. As they left the institute, Catherine invited them to dinner at a nearby restaurant. Nothing extravagant, a comfortable family place where Sophie wouldn't feel out of place. Over pasta and ice cream sundaes, Catherine observed the bond between mother and daughter. Sarah worked double shifts as a cleaner to make ends meet, yet somehow managed to nurture her daughter's extraordinary mind with limited resources. "How did you first notice Sophie's abilities?" Catherine asked as the child happily demolished her dessert. Sarah smiled softly. She was speaking in full sentences before she was 2. By 4, she had taught herself to read from billboard advertisements and cereal boxes. Her expression grew more serious. "When she started school, I thought things would get better, that she'd get the stimulation she needed. But her kindergarten teacher just said she was precocious and left it at that." "And her father?" Catherine asked carefully. Sarah's face closed slightly. "Not in the picture. He doesn't know about her." Catherine nodded, not pressing further. "The program Dr. Patterson outlined is excellent but expensive. I'd like to help make it possible." Sarah's guard immediately went up. "Ms. Morgan." "Catherine, please." "Catherine, we appreciate everything you've done, but I can't accept that kind of charity." "It's not charity," Catherine insisted. "Consider it an investment in exceptional talent. My foundation supports educational initiatives for gifted children from underprivileged backgrounds. Sophie fits our criteria perfectly." It wasn't entirely true. Catherine's foundation existed primarily as a tax vehicle for her family's wealth, focusing mainly on medical research. But a single phone call could expand its mission to include educational grants. Sarah remained hesitant. "I don't want Sophie to feel indebted to anyone, or to be turned into some kind of project." "No strings attached," Catherine promised. "The foundation provides funding. You make the decisions about Sophie's education. If at any point you're uncomfortable, you can withdraw from the program." Sophie, who had been quietly listening while pretending to focus on her dessert, suddenly spoke up. "Mom, I want to learn more languages. And math. And science, please." Sarah looked at her daughter's hopeful expression and sighed. "We'll try it, for a few months. But your childhood comes first, understand? If it becomes too much, we stop." Sophie beamed, launching into a detailed explanation of all the languages she wanted to master. Her enthusiasm infectious. Catherine found herself smiling genuinely, a rare occurrence in her high-pressure life. Later that evening, as Catherine's driver took her back to her luxury penthouse overlooking Central Park, she received a call from her father. "Catherine, the quarterly reports are concerning. The Milan acquisition is underperforming, and the board is questioning your decision to delay the Shanghai expansion." "Hello to you too, Dad," Catherine replied dryly. "I'm fine, thanks for asking." Lorenzo Morgan had never been one for pleasantries. As founder of Morgan Global Investments, he viewed personal relationships, even with his only daughter, through the lens of strategic advantage. "I didn't call for small talk," he continued. "The family foundation audit raised some flags. There's an unauthorized evaluation expense for some educational institute. Care to explain?" Catherine tensed. Of course he would notice. Nothing escaped Lorenzo's attention when it came to money. "It's a new initiative I'm exploring," she said carefully. "Supporting gifted children from disadvantaged backgrounds." "Since when do you care about charity cases?" Lorenzo scoffed. "We have established philanthropic priorities, Catherine, ones that enhance our corporate image appropriately." "This is different," Catherine insisted. "This child is extraordinary. You should see her." "I don't need to see her," Lorenzo interrupted. "I need you focused on the business. Your sister's wedding is next month, and the Nakamura delegation will be attending. I expect you to be fully prepared for those negotiations." The call ended abruptly, leaving Catherine staring at the city lights below. Her father's disapproval was nothing new, but for the first time in years it didn't feel quite so crushing. Something had shifted in her priorities, a subtle realignment that both frightened and exhilarated her. Catherine opened her laptop, beginning a draft proposal to expand her foundation's mission. As she worked late into the night, she realized she felt more energized than she had in months. The merger documents that usually commanded her full attention remained untouched, while a new purpose took shape beneath her fingers. Over the next 3 months, Sophie blossomed under her new educational program. Catherine had secured a team of specialized tutors who visited 3 times weekly, each marveling at the child's capacity for absorption and integration of complex concepts. On Tuesdays, Dr. Alvarez guided Sophie through advanced mathematical principles. Thursdays belonged to Professor Chen, who nurtured her linguistic talents, and Saturday mornings brought Dr. Rivera, who introduced scientific concepts through hands-on experiments that transformed Sarah's small apartment kitchen into a laboratory of discovery. Catherine made a point of attending at least 1 session each week, ostensibly to monitor the foundation's investment, but in truth, she found herself drawn to Sophie's world. The child's unbridled enthusiasm for learning reminded Catherine of her own childhood passion for business, before her father's rigid expectations had transformed passion into obligation. Today, Catherine arrived at Sarah's modest apartment in Queens, just as Sophie was completing a complex translation exercise. The walls of the living room, once bare, now displayed colorful charts of verb conjugations and vocabulary lists in multiple languages. A small whiteboard held mathematical equations far beyond elementary school level. "Ms. Catherine," Sophie exclaimed, abandoning her work to greet her benefactor with an exuberant hug. "Listen to this." She launched into a flawless recitation in Mandarin, her pronunciation earning an approving nod from Professor Chen. "Remarkable progress," the professor commented as he packed his materials. "She's absorbing Mandarin characters at a rate I've never witnessed in a non-native speaker, particularly one so young." After he departed, Catherine sat with Sarah at the small kitchen table while Sophie returned to her studies, humming contentedly. "How are you holding up?" Catherine asked, noting the shadows beneath Sarah's eyes. Sarah offered a tired smile. "It's a lot to manage alongside work, but seeing her so happy," she gestured towards Sophie, who was now scribbling enthusiastically in a notebook. "The school doesn't know what to do with her. They've started giving her independent projects while the other kids do regular lessons. Have you considered the specialized academy Dr. Patterson recommended?" Catherine inquired, sipping the coffee Sarah had prepared. "The tuition is astronomical," Sarah replied, shaking her head. "Even with your foundation's help, the foundation could cover it entirely," Catherine interjected gently, "including transportation and materials." Sarah's expression reflected her internal struggle, gratitude warring with pride. "How you've already done so much." Catherine leaned forward. "Sarah, your daughter has a mind that appears once in a generation. Nurturing that gift isn't just the right thing to do for Sophie, it benefits society as a whole." Before Sarah could respond, Catherine's phone rang. The screen displayed Lorenzo Morgan, causing her to stiffen involuntarily. "Excuse me, I need to take this." Stepping into the hallway, Catherine answered with professional composure. "Hello, Father?" "Catherine, where are you? The Nakamura presentation begins in 40 minutes, and your assistant says you're not in the office." Lorenzo's voice carried the sharp edge of disapproval she'd known since childhood. Catherine checked her watch, alarmed. The tutorial session had made her lose track of time, something that never happened in her meticulously scheduled life. "I'm handling a foundation matter," she replied, already calculating the fastest route to Manhattan. "I'll be there." "See that you are. The Nakamura account represents a $3 billion opportunity. Your sister Claire managed to secure their interest despite your absence from the preliminary meeting last week." The barb struck its target. Claire, younger by 4 years, had always been positioned as Catherine's competition rather than her ally, another of Lorenzo's motivational tactics. "I'll be there," Catherine repeated, ending the call. She returned to the kitchen, apologizing to Sarah for the abrupt departure. "Important business?" Sarah asked without judgment. "Always," Catherine sighed. "But this was actually my fault. I lost track of time." Sarah smiled knowingly. "Sophie has that effect on people. She pulls you into her world and suddenly hours have passed." Catherine nodded, gathering her belongings. As she prepared to leave, Sophie emerged from her study corner with a small handmade card. "I made this for you," she said shyly, presenting the colorful creation. "It says, 'Thank you' in 12 languages." Catherine accepted the gift, unexpectedly moved by the gesture. "It's beautiful, Sophie, thank you." "Will you come to my school presentation next week?" Sophie asked hopefully. "I'm doing a project on global communication systems, and Mom said maybe you could come because you do business all over the world." Catherine hesitated, mentally reviewing her calendar, board meetings, conference calls, the Tokyo proposal. "I'll be there," she heard herself promise, surprising herself as much as Sophie, whose face lit up with delight. Throughout the Nakamura presentation, Catherine performed flawlessly, securing the partnership with skillful negotiation. Yet part of her mind remained in that small Queen's apartment, with its vocabulary charts and the child who created thank you cards in multiple languages. The following week, Catherine rearranged a crucial investor meeting to attend Sophie's presentation. Sitting among parents of varying socio-economic backgrounds in uncomfortable elementary school chairs, she felt strangely out of place in her Armani suit. When Sophie took the small stage, however, Catherine's discomfort vanished, replaced by unexpected pride as the child delivered a sophisticated analysis of how language barriers affect global commerce, a topic Catherine had casually discussed with her during one tutorial session. "That's quite a protégé you found," commented the school principal, approaching Catherine afterward. "We've never seen anything like her abilities. It's a shame our resources are so limited." "She deserves better," Catherine agreed, watching Sophie accept congratulations from classmates who seemed simultaneously impressed and bewildered by her presentation. "Much better," the principal confirmed. "Between us, Mrs. Bennett works incredibly hard, but families in our district rarely access the kind of opportunities Sophie needs." Something in the woman's tone sparked Catherine's curiosity. "Has anyone else expressed interest in Sophie's education?" The principal hesitated. "A research institute contacted us about including her in a study of exceptional children. They offered a substantial grant to the school in exchange for regular cognitive testing." Catherine's protective instincts flared unexpectedly. "Did they approach Sarah directly?" "Not yet. I suggested they should work through proper channels, starting with parental consent." "Good," Catherine nodded, making a mental note to investigate further. The idea of Sophie becoming a research subject without careful oversight disturbed her more than it should have for a mere philanthropic project. That evening, as her driver navigated through Manhattan traffic, Catherine found herself scrolling through photos she'd taken of Sophie's presentation rather than reviewing quarterly projections. One image captured Sophie mid-explanation, her small hands gesturing emphatically, eyes alight with intelligence and enthusiasm. Catherine set it as her phone's background without fully understanding why. The following day, a memo appeared on Catherine's desk. Regarding foundation expenditures, it outlined concerning allocations and questioned the strategic value of the recent educational grants. Though it bore her CFO's signature, Catherine recognized her father's influence in every carefully crafted phrase of disapproval. Catherine was composing a pointed response when her assistant interrupted with an urgent message. A journalist from the Financial Chronicle was requesting comment on an upcoming article about emotional decision-making in corporate leadership. The piece apparently questioned whether Catherine's recent philanthropic activities represented a conflict of interest with her fiduciary responsibilities. "Who's behind this?" Catherine demanded, though she already suspected the answer. Her assistant looked uncomfortable. The tip reportedly came from within Morgan Global. Internal sabotage. Catherine's jaw tightened. Claire's ambition, fueled by their father's manipulation, had finally crossed into open warfare. Before Catherine could formulate a response strategy, her phone chimed with a calendar alert. "Sophie, language competition." Catherine stared at the notification, suddenly remembering her promise to attend the Regional Linguistics Challenge, where Sophie would be competing against students twice her age. The event coincided exactly with the emergency board meeting her father had called to address concerns about leadership direction. For the first time in her career, Catherine found herself at a genuine crossroads. The board meeting represented professional obligation, family loyalty, and the path she had followed unquestioningly for decades. Sophie's competition represented something else, something Catherine couldn't quite define, but felt with increasing certainty. "Cancel my car to headquarters," she told her startled assistant. "Have it meet me at the Manhattan Academic Center instead." But the board meeting, "Send my proxy statement. I have a prior commitment." Her assistant's expression reflected the unprecedented nature of Catherine's decision. In 15 years, she had never prioritized a personal commitment over her father's directives. The linguistics competition showcased young talent from across the Northeast, with Sophie as the youngest participant by several years. From her seat in the audience, Catherine watched the child approach each challenge with confidence beyond her years, switching effortlessly between languages that had taken Catherine years of tutoring to master for international business. When Sophie received first place in the elementary division and an honorary mention in the middle school category, Catherine found herself applauding with uncharacteristic enthusiasm. Sarah, seated beside her, wiped away tears of pride. "I never imagined this," she whispered. "When I was cleaning offices at night with Sophie doing homework in storage closets, I never thought—" Catherine squeezed her hand in understanding, her own throat unexpectedly tight with emotion. As they celebrated afterward with ice cream, becoming something of a tradition following Sophie's achievements, Catherine's phone buzzed relentlessly with messages from the board meeting. She silenced it without checking, focusing instead on Sophie's animated recounting of the competition's most challenging moments. "Ms. Catherine," Sophie asked suddenly, "why do you wear a mask at work?" The question caught Catherine off guard. "What do you mean?" "Mum took me to your office once to say thank you for the tutors. I saw you in a meeting through the glass walls. You looked different, like you were wearing a face that wasn't yours." Sarah began to apologize for the personal observation, but Catherine waved her off, strangely moved by the child's perception. "Sometimes adults pretend to be what others expect," she explained carefully, "especially in business." Sophie considered this with serious contemplation. "That sounds exhausting," she finally declared. "I like the real you better, the one who comes to my school and eats ice cream." Catherine smiled, a genuine expression that felt foreign on features more accustomed to strategic pleasantness. "I think I like that version better too." Later that night, Catherine finally reviewed the messages from the board meeting. As expected, her absence had been noted with disapproval. Her father had stepped in to salvage the situation, effectively undermining her authority. The final message from Lorenzo himself was terse. "My office, 8 a.m. tomorrow. Non-negotiable." Catherine closed her eyes, sensing the approaching collision between the life she had built and the person she was becoming. For the first time in her adult life, she found herself questioning whether the corner office, the family legacy, and her father's approval were worth the price they demanded. The revelation left her both terrified and strangely liberated, like a prisoner who suddenly notices the cell door has been unlocked all along. The Morgan Global Investments headquarters occupied 30 floors of a gleaming skyscraper in Midtown Manhattan. Catherine had always taken pride in the building's imposing presence on the skyline, a physical manifestation of her family's power and influence. This morning, however, as she stepped from her town car, the tower seemed more prison than achievement. Lorenzo Morgan's office dominated the top floor, its floor-to-ceiling windows offering panoramic views of the city he considered his personal domain. At precisely 8 o'clock, Catherine entered the familiar space, armored in a perfectly tailored suit and the composed expression she had perfected over decades of corporate battles. Her father stood at the window, his back to the door, silver hair immaculately styled despite his 73 years. He didn't turn when she entered, a power play she recognized from countless previous confrontations. "Sit down, Catherine," he instructed, his gaze still fixed on the city below. She remained standing. "I prefer not to." Lorenzo turned slowly, one eyebrow arched at this small rebellion. "The board meeting yesterday was crucial. Your absence was noted by every major stakeholder." "I sent my proxy statement and full briefing materials," Catherine replied evenly. "The deal proceeded as planned." "That's not the point." Lorenzo moved to his desk, lifting a folder emblazoned with the Morgan Foundation logo. "This is about priorities and judgment. You've been diverting significant resources to a personal project, a cleaning woman's child of all things." Catherine felt a flash of anger at his dismissive tone. Sophie Bennett is exceptionally gifted. The Foundation's mission includes supporting educational initiatives. The Foundation exists to enhance our corporate image and provide strategic tax advantages, Lorenzo corrected coldly. "Not to indulge your sudden maternal instincts." The barb struck deeper than he knew. At 42, Catherine had sacrificed the possibility of her own family at the altar of career advancement, a choice her father had encouraged at every crossroads. The girl scores off the charts on cognitive assessments, Catherine countered. Her linguistic abilities alone could— I don't care if she's the next Einstein, Lorenzo interrupted. This distraction is affecting your performance. The Milan acquisition is underperforming. You missed the Nakamura preliminary meeting, and now you're skipping board discussions for children's competitions. He tossed a newspaper onto the desk between them. The business section featured a small article questioning Catherine's recent decision-making and emotional investment in non-strategic philanthropy. Claire had nothing to do with this, Lorenzo stated, anticipating her accusation. Though she's certainly prepared to step up if your focus continues to waver, Catherine's jaw tightened. The implied threat was clear. Her position, the culmination of 20 years of relentless work, could be taken from her. By her younger sister, with her father's blessing. The foundation is my division to direct, she said carefully. The bylaws give me full discretion over educational grants. Bylaws can be amended, Lorenzo replied with a cold smile. Board votes can be called. Priorities can be realigned. For a moment they stared at each other across the expanse of his mahogany desk, a battlefield where Catherine had fought for his approval her entire life. What do you want from me? She finally asked, though she already knew the answer. End this distraction, return to your actual responsibilities. The Tokyo expansion requires your full attention, and the European restructuring can't wait. Lorenzo's tone softened marginally. You've worked too hard to risk everything over some misplaced sentimentality, Catherine. And if I choose to continue supporting Sophie's education, Lorenzo's expression hardened, then you'll do so without foundation resources and with the understanding that your position here may become untenable. The ultimatum hung in the air between them. Catherine felt an unexpected calm descend, the clarity that comes when long blurred lines suddenly sharpen into focus. I see, she said simply. Lorenzo nodded, assuming victory as he had countless times before. The Richardson portfolio needs immediate attention, and Claire mentioned concerns about the Chicago property acquisition. No, Catherine interrupted. Lorenzo stopped mid-sentence, unaccustomed to contradiction. Excuse me? I said no. Catherine's voice remained level, but something fundamental had shifted in her demeanor. I won't be leveraged into abandoning a child with extraordinary potential because it doesn't fit your definition of strategic advantage. This isn't a negotiation, Lorenzo warned, anger flashing in eyes so similar to her own. You're right, Catherine agreed. It's not. She removed her company ID from her blazer pocket and placed it deliberately on his desk. I resign. For once, Lorenzo Morgan appeared genuinely shocked. Don't be absurd. You're throwing away a $3 billion empire over a charity case. I'm choosing not to be the person who would make that choice, Catherine replied with unexpected serenity. Effective immediately. Lorenzo recovered quickly, his expression turning to stone. If you walk out that door, you're not just leaving the company, you're leaving the family. Your trust fund, your position on the foundation board, your inheritance, all of it goes. Catherine had anticipated this nuclear option, Lorenzo's ultimate control mechanism. What surprised her was how little it frightened her now. Then I guess I'll have to succeed on my own merits, she said, turning toward the door. Something you never quite believed I could do. Catherine, Lorenzo's voice carried the authority that had shaped empires and broken competitors. Don't you dare walk away from me. She paused at the threshold, turning to face her father one last time. You taught me to recognize value, Father, to invest in potential. I'm simply following your greatest lesson. The elevator ride to the lobby passed in a blur. Catherine moved through the familiar corridors on autopilot, nodding mechanically to surprised employees who stepped aside as she passed. Only when she reached the street did the magnitude of her decision register fully. Catherine Morgan, heir to a financial empire, had just rendered herself effectively unemployed. Her phone began ringing immediately. Her assistant, the board secretary, her father's chief counsel. She silenced each call, walking aimlessly through the crowded Manhattan streets as the morning sun climbed higher. For the first time in decades, she had nowhere specific she needed to be. By midday, the news had spread through financial circles. Former colleagues began sending carefully worded messages, some expressing shock, others thinly veiled satisfaction at her downfall. Her sister Claire called 6 times before leaving a voicemail that oscillated between concern and poorly concealed triumph. Catherine found herself in Central Park, sitting on a bench near the children's playground. She watched as mothers and nannies supervised laughing children, their worlds uncomplicated by hostile takeovers and family dynasties. Her phone buzzed with a text from Sarah Bennett. Sophie got accepted to present at the Young Linguist Symposium. She's so excited to tell you. A simple message that suddenly justified everything. As afternoon faded into evening, Catherine entered her penthouse for what she already knew would be one of the last times. The property belonged to Morgan Holdings. Her father would ensure she couldn't remain. Her assistant had sent an urgent message. Lorenzo had called an emergency board meeting to address the leadership transition. Catherine began methodically sorting her personal items from those belonging to the company. The task proved surprisingly simple. After 2 decades of 70-hour work weeks, she had accumulated remarkably few personal possessions that truly mattered. A knock at her door interrupted the packing. Catherine opened it to find Edward Pierce, her father's longtime lawyer and the Morgan family's legal advisor for 30 years. "Catherine," he greeted her solemnly, "may I come in?" She stepped aside, gesturing him toward the living room where bankers' boxes now sat half-filled. "Lorenzo asked me to deliver these," Edward said, placing a folder on her coffee table. "Severance terms and confidentiality agreements." Catherine didn't reach for the documents. "I'm sure they're comprehensive." Edward shifted uncomfortably. "He's prepared to be generous if you'll reconsider or at minimum manage a smooth transition." "I'm sure he is," Catherine replied coolly. The attorney hesitated. "I've known you since you were a child, Catherine. This isn't like you, impulsive decisions, throwing away everything you've built." "Perhaps you never knew me at all," she suggested quietly. Edward studied her for a long moment. "This is about more than just that child's education program, isn't it?" Catherine smiled faintly. "It always amazes me how men like you and my father can recognize patterns in market fluctuations, but remain completely blind to patterns in human behavior." "Meaning?" "Meaning I've spent my entire life trying to earn the approval of a man who designed the game so I could never win," Catherine explained. "Sophie Bennett showed me another way to measure success, one that doesn't require sacrificing everything human about myself." Edward sighed, looking suddenly older than his years. "Lorenzo has instructed me to inform you that your access to all Morgan accounts will be terminated effective midnight. The Foundation Board will meet tomorrow to review all recent grants." He gestured to the penthouse around them. "The corporate lease on this property will not be renewed." Catherine nodded, having expected nothing less. "I understand. He's also directed the family office to prepare documentation removing you from the Morgan Trust and all associated inheritance vehicles," Edward continued, genuine regret in his voice, "unless you return to your position within 48 hours. "My father always did believe in scorched earth tactics," Catherine observed with surprising calm. "Catherine, be reasonable," Edward implored. "You're talking about walking away from billions for what? To sponsor some cleaning lady's gifted child? There are other ways to help her without destroying yourself." "That cleaning lady works 18-hour days to support her daughter," Catherine replied sharply. "She has more dignity and determination than most of the board members sitting in judgment of my decisions." Edward recognized the futility of further argument. "The terms are spelled out in the documents. Should you reconsider, you know how to reach me." After he left, Catherine continued packing, her movements methodical despite the turmoil inside. Around midnight, as predicted, her company credit cards were declined when she attempted to order dinner. Her email access disappeared. By morning, she had been systematically excised from the empire she had helped build. 2 days later, Catherine signed a lease on a modest but elegant apartment in a brownstone near Columbia University, close enough to maintain contact with Sophie while she determined her next steps. She paid 6 months' rent in advance from her personal savings, which, though substantial by normal standards, represented merely a fraction of the wealth she had relinquished. Her mother called as Catherine was arranging furniture in her new home, her voice trembling with emotion. "What have you done, Catherine? Your father is beside himself. The board is in chaos. Claire doesn't know how to handle the Tokyo expansion alone." "Hello, Mother," Catherine replied evenly. "I'm fine, thank you for asking." Marianne Morgan had always existed in Lorenzo's shadow, her own ambitions sublimated beneath his domineering personality. "You need to apologize to your father," she insisted. "This rebellion has gone far enough." "This isn't rebellion, Mother. It's clarity." Catherine placed a framed photo of Sophie on her new mantelpiece, the child beaming with her linguistics competition medal. "I've finally figured out what matters to me." "Family matters," Marianne exclaimed. "Legacy matters." "Yes," Catherine agreed softly, "just not the way Father defines those terms." After the call ended, Catherine stood at her new window, gazing at the tree-lined street below. The apartment was perhaps a tenth the size of her former penthouse, the neighborhood pleasant but unremarkable compared to her previous elite address. Yet she felt lighter than she had in years, unburdened by the weight of expectations she had never questioned until now. Her phone chimed with a message from Sarah. "Sophie has something to show you. Can you visit tomorrow?" Catherine smiled, typing her reply. "I'll be there at 4, looking forward to it." Whatever came next, she had made her choice. The price had been steep: family, fortune, position. But as she settled into her new reality, Catherine realized that some forms of wealth couldn't be measured in dollars or stock options. Some investments yielded returns that balance sheets could never capture. For the first time in her adult life, Catherine Morgan had chosen a path her father hadn't designed for her. The uncertainty was terrifying and absolutely exhilarating. Catherine's new life took shape with surprising ease. The first month passed in a blur of practical adjustments, setting up a home office, establishing an independent consulting practice, reconnecting with contacts who weren't aligned with her father's interests. Her expertise in international finance remained valuable. Several former clients reached out discreetly, eager to retain her services without the Morgan overhead. Sarah and Sophie visited her new apartment regularly, their presence transforming the space from merely a residence into something that felt increasingly like a home. Catherine found herself looking forward to their visits, Sophie's excited updates about her educational projects, Sarah's quiet determination as she navigated her daughter's expanding opportunities. Today, Catherine sat at her dining table, reviewing prospectus documents for a potential client when her doorbell rang. She opened it to find Sophie bouncing with excitement, clutching a tablet. "Ms. Catherine, I got invited to the International Youth Language Summit in Boston. Look!" She thrust the tablet forward, displaying the formal invitation. "Only 20 kids from the whole country get selected." Catherine examined the prestigious invitation with genuine pride. In just 4 months, Sophie had progressed from hidden talent to recognized prodigy. "This is extraordinary, Sophie. Congratulations." Sarah followed her daughter in, her expression a mixture of pride and concern. "It's a 3-day event. The symposium covers accommodations, but..." She hesitated, the financial implications hanging unspoken between them. Since Catherine's resignation, the Morgan Foundation had withdrawn its support for Sophie's educational programs. Catherine had been personally covering the costs of tutors and enrichment activities, a significant expense on her now limited income. "I'll handle the travel arrangements," Catherine offered immediately. "This is too important an opportunity to miss." Sarah's resistance had softened over time, but not disappeared entirely. "You've already done so much." "I want to," Catherine insisted. "Besides, I have business contacts in Boston I should reconnect with. It makes perfect sense for me to go as well." Sophie looked between the adults hopefully. "Mom, please? Miss Catherine could be my chaperone for the symposium parts." Sarah relented with a smile. "All right, but we're taking the bus to save money." "Actually," Catherine interjected, "I was thinking of driving. My car is just sitting in garage storage, and a road trip might be fun." The luxury vehicle, one of the few assets Catherine had purchased independently before her resignation, remained her sole concession to her former lifestyle. The suggestion of a shared journey sparked immediate enthusiasm from Sophie, who began planning educational stops along the route with characteristic thoroughness. As they finalized details, Catherine's phone rang with a number she didn't recognize. Excusing herself, she answered to find Edward Pierce on the line. "Catherine, we need to talk," the attorney said without preamble. "There have been developments." "I'm with company right now, Edward," she replied coolly. "It's about your continued involvement with the Bennett girl," he pressed. "Lorenzo has concerns about potential corporate liability." Catherine's grip tightened on the phone. "What are you talking about?" "Just meet me." Tomorrow, noon, at Westfields on 53rd. After she ended the call, Catherine returned to find Sophie teaching Sarah a complex Italian phrase, their heads bent together over a notebook. The domestic tableau struck Catherine with unexpected force. How quickly these two had become central to her reconfigured life. "Everything okay?" Sarah asked, noting Catherine's expression. "Just business," Catherine assured her with a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. The following day, Catherine arrived at Westfields, a discreet restaurant frequented by Manhattan's legal elite, to find Edward already seated in a corner booth. His expression was grave as she joined him. "Thank you for coming," he began formally. "Get to the point, Edward," Catherine replied, declining the wine he offered. "What liability concerns is my father inventing now?" Edward sighed. "This isn't invented, Catherine. Lorenzo has authorized an investigation into your relationship with the Bennett family." "Investigation?" Catherine repeated incredulously. "The Foundation Board is questioning whether your interest in the child constitutes inappropriate emotional entanglement affecting business judgment. There are concerns about potential misuse of company resources during your tenure." Catherine's laugh held no humor. "I resigned rather than fight that battle, Edward. What more does he want?" "Distance," Edward replied bluntly. "Complete severance from anything connected to Morgan Global. Your continued involvement with the Bennett girl has become problematic for the narrative." "The narrative?" "Claire is being positioned as the new face of Morgan leadership, stable, strategic, untainted by emotional decision-making. Your ongoing connection to the situation that precipitated your departure undermines that transition story." Catherine studied the man who had once drafted her first employment contract, now delivering her father's latest threats. "And if I maintain my relationship with Sophie and her mother," Edward looked uncomfortable, "Lorenzo is prepared to challenge the legality of certain foundation grants authorized during your directorship. There could be allegations of financial impropriety." "That's absurd," Catherine snapped. "Every grant was properly documented and board approved." "Facts matter less than perception, Catherine. You know this." Edward lowered his voice. "There's also the matter of Sarah Bennett's employment history and immigration status, which apparently contains some irregularities." The implied threat against Sarah sent a cold wave of fury through Catherine. "Tell my father that if he comes after Sarah or Sophie, I'll take everything I know about Morgan Global's business practices to the financial press. 20 years in the inner circle taught me where all the bodies are buried, Edward." The attorney blanched slightly. "I'm just the messenger, Catherine." "Then deliver my message," she replied, rising from the table. "The Bennett family is off limits, permanently." As Catherine strode from the restaurant, her phone chimed with a calendar notification. "Sophie, science presentation." Despite the confrontation with Edward, she found herself smiling at the reminder. Some appointments mattered more than others now. That evening, Catherine sat in the auditorium of Sophie's elementary school, watching as the child confidently explained the principles of magnetic levitation to an audience of impressed parents and bewildered classmates. Afterward, they celebrated with ice cream, now an established tradition following Sophie's achievements. "I heard back from that private academy," Sarah mentioned as Sophie happily demolished a sundae larger than her head. "They're offering a full scholarship for next year." "That's wonderful news," Catherine replied, genuinely pleased. The Westfield Academy was among the most prestigious schools in the city, with resources that could properly nurture Sophie's extraordinary abilities. "There's a catch," Sarah continued, her expression guarded. "They want her to participate in their Exceptional Minds research program. Weekly cognitive assessments, brain scans twice a year, regular documentation of her learning processes." Catherine frowned. "That sounds more like a laboratory than a school." "The educational opportunity is incredible," Sarah acknowledged, "but I don't want her to feel like a specimen under glass." "What does Sophie think?" They both glanced at the child, who was carefully arranging her remaining ice cream into geographical shapes, whispering country names to herself in multiple languages. "I haven't told her yet," Sarah admitted. "I wanted to talk to you first." The simple statement, the acknowledgement that Catherine's opinion mattered in decisions about Sophie's future, affected her deeply. In the sterile world of corporate finance, relationships were transactional, alliances temporary. This felt different, consequential. "I think," Catherine said carefully, That Sophie deserves a school that values her as a person, not just a research subject. Sarah nodded in agreement. But where else could she get that level of education? We can't afford private tuition, and the public gifted programs have waiting lists years long. Catherine considered the problem, her strategic mind already formulating alternatives. What if we created something customized? A hybrid program with carefully selected tutors, university course auditing for advanced subjects, and regular interaction with peers through select programs. That sounds expensive, Sarah observed. I have resources, Catherine assured her, though in truth her financial situation was growing increasingly constrained. The consulting work provided income, but nothing approaching her former compensation. Her savings, while substantial, weren't unlimited. As if reading her thoughts, Sarah asked gently, "How are you really doing, Catherine? After everything with your family?" Catherine hesitated, unaccustomed to such direct personal inquiries. In her former circle, vulnerability was weaponized, never shared. Yet something about Sarah's genuine concern broke through her practiced composure. "It's been an adjustment," she admitted. "Financially, professionally, personally. Everything changed overnight." "Do you regret it?" Sarah asked, her gaze direct. Catherine watched Sophie arranging napkins into some complex organizational system, her brow furrowed in concentration. "Not for a moment," she answered truthfully. Later that week, Catherine received an email that momentarily stole her breath. The sender was listed simply as M. Bennett, a name from her past she had never expected to see again. Michael Bennett, Sarah's ex-husband, Sophie's father. The message was brief. "We need to talk about Sophie. Please contact me." Catherine stared at the screen, her mind racing. In all their conversations, Sarah had maintained that Sophie's father wasn't involved in their lives, that he had no knowledge of his extraordinary daughter. Yet here was direct communication, specifically mentioning Sophie by name. Instead of responding immediately, Catherine initiated a discreet background check, a remnant of her corporate habit of thorough due diligence. The results proved surprising. Michael Bennett was now Michael Reynolds, having changed his name 8 years earlier. He lived in Philadelphia, working as an architectural engineer with a respected firm. Most significantly, he had spent considerable time and resources searching for Sarah and a child he apparently knew existed. The investigation revealed a man who had placed hundreds of inquiries with private investigators, searching hospitals and school districts across multiple states. His digital footprint included memberships in forums for estranged parents and multiple public records requests, all seeking information about a woman named Sarah Bennett and a child who would now be Sophie's age. This contradicted the narrative Catherine had pieced together from Sarah's reluctant comments about Sophie's father. Far from being disinterested or absent by choice, Michael Reynolds appeared to have been systematically searching for his daughter for years. Catherine deliberated carefully before arranging a meeting. Without informing Sarah, a decision that troubled her ethically but seemed necessary to understand the situation fully, she agreed to meet Michael at a neutral location, a quiet cafe halfway between New York and Philadelphia. She arrived early, selecting a table with a clear view of the entrance. At precisely the appointed time, a man entered, tall with dark hair graying slightly at the temples and eyes strikingly similar to Sophie's. He scanned the room briefly before identifying Catherine from the photo she had sent. "Ms. Morgan," he greeted her, extending his hand. "Thank you for meeting me." "Mr. Reynolds," she replied, noting his momentary surprise at her use of his current name. "Or do you prefer Bennett?" He smiled ruefully as he sat. "You've done your homework." "Always," Catherine confirmed. "What I haven't understood is why Sophie's father would need to contact me rather than her mother directly." Michael's expression darkened. "Because Sarah disappeared 8 years ago, taking my unborn child with her. I've been searching ever since." Catherine maintained her composed exterior despite her shock. "That doesn't align with what I understand of the situation." "I'm not surprised," Michael replied, opening a worn leather portfolio. "Sarah had her reasons for leaving, I'm sure. What I don't understand is why she's maintained the deception for so long." He spread several documents on the table: hospital records, police reports from missing persons inquiries, letters to school districts. The evidence of his years-long search was undeniable. "How did you find them now?" Catherine asked, examining a particularly detailed investigative report. I didn't, Michael admitted. Not exactly. I read an article about the Young Linguist Symposium featuring extraordinary children. There was a photograph of a girl named Sophie Bennett with a mention of her educational benefactor, Catherine Morgan. The resemblance to my family was unmistakable. He produced the magazine article, and Catherine immediately recognized the photo from Sophie's regional competition 3 months earlier. The journalist had been more interested in Catherine's presence, the fallen financial heiress supporting a prodigy from humble origins, than in Sophie's actual achievements. What do you want? Catherine asked directly. To meet my daughter, Michael answered without hesitation. To understand why Sarah ran. To be part of Sophie's life, if possible. And if Sarah objects. Michael's expression reflected complex emotions. Hurt, determination, a flicker of anger quickly controlled. I have parental rights. I never abandoned them. They were taken from me. Legal rights don't always align with what's best for a child, Catherine observed, thinking of her own legally binding but emotionally bankrupt family relationships. I agree, Michael said, surprising her, which is why I'm here talking to you first instead of showing up at their door or filing for custody. I don't want to traumatize Sophie or create unnecessary conflict. I just want a chance. Catherine studied him carefully, assessing his sincerity with the same precision she had once applied to evaluating investment opportunities. Tell me what happened between you and Sarah. Michael hesitated, then nodded, accepting the implicit challenge. We met at a charity fundraiser. I was designing the expansion for the venue. It was intense, immediate. Within months we were living together, planning a future. He paused, gathering his thoughts. Then Sarah discovered she was pregnant. She was thrilled. I was too. We started making plans, a wedding, a nursery, names for boys and girls. His voice grew strained. And then one day I came home and everything was gone. Sarah, her belongings, all traces of our life together. No note, no explanation. She'd simply vanished. People don't usually disappear without cause, Catherine noted carefully. I've spent 8 years trying to understand what happened, Michael replied. The only thing I can imagine is that someone convinced her to leave, told her something about me that frightened her. A chill ran through Catherine as she recalled her father's methods, how Lorenzo Morgan eliminated people he considered obstacles with surgical precision. The timing aligned with her own brief relationship with Michael, which Lorenzo had effectively terminated when he deemed the architect unsuitable for his daughter's status. Did you ever meet my father? Catherine asked abruptly. Michael looked startled by the apparent non sequitur. Lorenzo Morgan, no, not directly, though I did receive a rather unusual phone call shortly before Sarah disappeared. Someone claiming to represent the Morgan family, expressing concerns about my relationship history. His expression darkened. I assumed it was connected to you, actually. We'd dated briefly the year before I met Sarah. The pieces clicked into horrifying clarity. Lorenzo, discovering Michael's new relationship with Sarah, had intervened again. This time manipulating a pregnant woman into believing her child's father represented some kind of threat. I need to make a call, Catherine said, rising from the table. Please wait. Outside the cafe, Catherine dialed Sarah's number with trembling fingers. When she answered, Catherine spoke without preamble. Sarah, did someone contact you about Michael before you left him? A long silence followed. How do you know about that? Sarah finally asked, her voice barely audible. Because Michael, Sophie's father, is sitting across from me right now, showing me 8 years' worth of evidence that he's been searching for you both since you disappeared. That's impossible, Sarah whispered. He wanted nothing to do with us. The man who called— What man, Sarah? Catherine pressed, though she already knew the answer. He said he was Michael's lawyer, that Michael had a history of fraud, that he'd abandoned his position under a false identity, that he wanted no responsibility for the child. He said— Sarah's voice broke. He said Michael wanted me gone, with enough money to stay gone permanently. Catherine closed her eyes, recognizing her father's tactics with sickening clarity. Sarah, I need you to listen carefully. I believe that call came from someone working for my father, the same man who ended my relationship with Michael the year before, who systematically eliminates anyone he considers unsuitable from our family circle. But why would your father care about me and Michael? Sarah asked, confusion evident in her voice. Control, Catherine replied simply. Complete control over everything and everyone connected to the Morgan name. Michael and I had a brief relationship that my father terminated. Finding him involved with someone else, someone connected to Morgan Global through employment, would have been unacceptable to him. The silence that followed was heavy with realization. All these years, Sarah finally said, Sophie growing up without her father because of a lie. Michael is still here, Catherine told her gently. He wants to meet Sophie, to be part of her life. I need to see him, Sarah decided. Alone, first, before Sophie knows anything. Of course, Catherine agreed. I'll arrange it. When Catherine returned to the cafe, Michael looked up expectantly. Sarah wants to meet with you, she informed him. To talk before Sophie knows anything about this situation. Relief washed over his features. Thank you. When? Tomorrow, Catherine decided. My apartment. Neutral ground for both of you. As Michael nodded his agreement, Catherine felt the weight of responsibility for orchestrating this reunion. Her father's manipulation had separated this family for 8 years. Now somehow, she found herself in position to help repair the damage Lorenzo had caused, a cosmic symmetry that wasn't lost on her. There's something you should know about Sophie, Catherine said carefully. She's extraordinary in ways that go beyond normal childhood development. Michael smiled. I saw the article. Languages, right? Among other things, Catherine confirmed, she's what educators call profoundly gifted. Her cognitive abilities place her in the highest measurable percentiles. Pride bloomed across Michael's face. Really? That's amazing. Then uncertainty followed. Will she even want to know me? After all this time, Catherine thought of Sophie's quiet questions about her father, carefully casual inquiries that revealed deeper yearning. She's been wondering about you her whole life, she assured him. Just be patient. This won't be simple for anyone. As they finalized details for the next day's meeting, Catherine reflected on the strange turns her life had taken. 6 months ago, she had been heir to a financial empire, isolated in privilege and purpose. Now she found herself mediating a family reunion, separated from her own family, rebuilding a life based on values her father would consider incomprehensible. The irony wasn't lost on her. In walking away from the Morgan legacy, she had somehow found herself exactly where she needed to be. Catherine spent the morning preparing her apartment for the momentous meeting. She arranged comfortable seating in the living room, ordered a selection of pastries from the neighborhood bakery, and stocked both adult-appropriate beverages and Sophie's favorite juice. The ordinary domestic activities helped calm her nerves about facilitating this potentially volatile reunion. Sarah arrived first, pale but composed. I didn't sleep, she admitted, as Catherine welcomed her inside. I kept thinking about all those years, all the choices made because of a single phone call. My father has built his empire on manipulating people's choices, Catherine replied grimly. I'm sorry you were caught in his web. Sarah moved to the window, anxiously watching the street below. What do I even say to him? Sorry I disappeared with your child because I believed a stranger over you. The truth, Catherine suggested. It's a good place to start. When Michael arrived precisely at noon, the atmosphere in the apartment grew thick with tension. He and Sarah stood frozen, staring at each other across Catherine's living room. Two people once intimately connected, now virtual strangers linked by an extraordinary child neither had expected. You look the same, Michael finally said, his voice rough with emotion. Sarah's composure wavered. You don't. You've gone grey at the temples. 8 years of searching will do that, he replied without accusation, but with unmistakable pain. Catherine discreetly retreated to the kitchen, giving them privacy while remaining available if needed. Through the partial opening of the door, she heard their halting conversation evolve from awkward pleasantries to harder truths. Why didn't you just ask me? Michael's anguished question carried clearly. One conversation could have prevented all of this. I was 23, pregnant and terrified, Sarah responded. The man said he had proof, documents about your past, evidence you'd abandoned another identity. He showed me papers, Michael, official-looking papers with court seals. The identity change was real, Michael acknowledged, but not for the reasons he implied. My stepfather was abusive. When I turned 18, I legally changed my surname to my mother's maiden name to break ties with him. There was nothing sinister about it. Their voices lowered as they continued comparing narratives, piecing together the elaborate deception that had separated them. Catherine busied herself arranging tea, feeling both responsible as Lorenzo's daughter and vindicated in her decision to break from his toxic influence. When she eventually rejoined them, Sarah and Michael sat close together on the sofa, examining photographs Michael had brought, a visual timeline of his years-long search for his family. "Catherine," Sarah said, looking up with reddened eyes, "Michael knows someone who might be able to trace the call that came that day to prove it was connected to your father." "That won't be necessary," Catherine assured them. "I recognize the methodology. It's how Lorenzo eliminated my relationship with Michael years earlier. The same calculated interference, the same type of false evidence." Michael looked at her in surprise. "You and I barely dated for 3 months. Long enough for my father to decide you weren't suitable for the Morgan dynasty," Catherine replied dryly. "He's remarkably consistent in his methods." The conversation shifted to Sophie, Michael eager to learn everything about the daughter he had never known, Sarah carefully sharing milestones and memories. Catherine provided context about Sophie's exceptional abilities, explaining the educational journey they had been navigating. "When can I meet her?" Michael finally asked, the question they had been circling. Sarah hesitated. "I need to prepare her first. She's known her whole life that her father wasn't part of our lives. Learning the truth, that you've been searching for her, that my decisions kept you apart. That's a lot for a 7-year-old to process, even one as advanced as Sophie. What if we create a casual introduction?" Catherine suggested, not revealing everything immediately, but allowing Sophie to meet Michael in a comfortable setting. They debated approaches, finally agreeing on a plan. Michael would be introduced as an architect, consulting on school design improvements, a legitimate reason for him to interact with Sophie without immediate pressure. Sarah would gradually prepare Sophie for the full truth, allowing the relationship to develop organically before the complete revelation. As they finalized details, Catherine's phone chimed with a message that made her stomach tighten. Claire Morgan, requesting access. Her sister was downstairs at the building's security entrance. "I need to handle something," Catherine excused herself, stepping into the hallway to call down to the doorman. "You can send her up." Minutes later, Claire Morgan strode into the apartment, immaculately dressed in designer business attire, her expression a practiced mask of professional pleasantness. At 38, she closely resembled Catherine, though her features carried none of the recent softening that had transformed her older sister's appearance. "Catherine," Claire greeted her coolly, eyes darting to the partially open living room door where voices could still be heard. "I see you're busy. How domestic?" "What brings you here, Claire?" Catherine asked directly, leading her sister to the kitchen to maintain privacy for Sarah and Michael. "Father is concerned," Claire replied, accepting the offered seat with reluctance. "Your continued association with the Bennett situation has created complications." "The Bennett situation has names," Catherine corrected. "Sarah and Sophie, human beings, not corporate liabilities." Claire's expression tightened. "Semantics don't change the facts. Your involvement with them contributed to your professional downfall, and now it's affecting Morgan Global's transition narrative. Is that really why you're here? To deliver another of Lorenzo's warnings?" Catherine studied her sister's face, seeing beneath the corporate veneer to the sibling she had once been close to, before their father's competitive manipulation had driven them apart. Something in Claire's posture shifted slightly. "The Tokyo expansion is floundering," she admitted. "Father's insisting we move forward, but the projections are concerning. The board is questioning whether I have the necessary experience to lead the initiative." "And Lorenzo blames me for abandoning ship," Catherine surmised. "He says you sabotaged the transition by leaving so abruptly," Claire confirmed. "But I think he's using me to punish you, setting me up with impossible expectations." The admission, a rare moment of vulnerability from her normally guarded sister, caught Catherine by surprise. "That sounds exactly like Lorenzo." Claire glanced toward the living room. "Is that her, the cleaning woman?" "Sarah," Catherine corrected firmly. "And yes, she's meeting with Sophie's father. A reunion made necessary because our father intervened in their relationship years ago, just as he did in my relationship with the same man the year before." Claire's eyes widened. "What?" Catherine explained the connection, watching as her sister processed the implications. Lorenzo doesn't just control our business decisions, Claire. He manipulates every aspect of our lives: personal relationships, family planning, geographic locations. Have you ever made a significant choice he didn't influence? The question hung between them, unanswered but resonating. Claire's gaze drifted to the modest apartment, taking in the simple furnishings that had replaced Catherine's former luxury. Are you really happier like this, without the Morgan resources? The position, the influence? Catherine considered the question honestly. I'm not always happy. Sometimes I'm terrified. But I'm making choices based on values I believe in, not calculations of what Lorenzo will approve. That freedom is worth the sacrifice. Claire appeared unconvinced. Father says you'll come crawling back once your savings run out. He's wrong, Catherine replied simply. I'd live in a studio apartment and work retail before I'd return to his control. Their conversation was interrupted by Sarah and Michael emerging from the living room. Their earlier tension now softened to cautious reconciliation. Catherine made brief introductions, watching as Claire automatically assessed them with the Morgan standard of strategic value. We should go, Sarah said, sensing the strained dynamic. Thank you for arranging this, Catherine. After they departed, Claire remained silent for several moments, her expression unreadable. They seem ordinary, she finally commented. Most people are, Catherine replied. That doesn't diminish their worth. Claire stood abruptly. I should return to the office. Father expects a full report on the European acquisitions by end of day. Of course he does, Catherine said, unable to keep the sadness from her voice. Tell me, Claire, when was the last time you did something simply because it brought you joy, not because it advanced your position or pleased Lorenzo? Her sister paused at the door, momentarily vulnerable. I can't afford those indulgences. We're not all willing to throw away everything for a moral stance. It's not about morality, Catherine corrected gently. It's about recognizing when the price of success becomes too high. After Claire left, Catherine sat alone in her kitchen, reflecting on the contrast between her sister's rigid adherence to Lorenzo's expectations and her own newfound, if precarious, independence. The apartment felt suddenly empty after the emotional intensity of the morning's meetings. Her phone chimed with a text from Sarah. Sophie's school just called. She's asking for you, having some kind of anxiety episode. Can you come? Catherine grabbed her keys without hesitation, the consulting work on her desk immediately forgotten. 20 minutes later, she arrived at Sophie's elementary school to find the child sitting rigid in the nurse's office, breathing rapidly, her small hands clenched into fists. Sophie? Catherine approached carefully, kneeling to meet the girl's eyes. What happened, sweetheart? Can't breathe right, Sophie managed between shallow gasps. My heart feels funny. Catherine recognized the symptoms immediately, the same anxiety attack she had experienced in the boardroom months earlier. I know exactly how that feels, she assured Sophie, gently taking her hands. Let's breathe together, okay? Slowly in through your nose, out through your mouth. As they breathed in tandem, Sophie's rigid posture gradually relaxed. They want me to do a presentation, she whispered, for important people from the education department, with cameras and everything. And that scared you? Catherine asked gently. Sophie nodded. What if I make a mistake? What if I'm not special enough? What if they decide I'm just regular after all? The fear in the child's voice struck Catherine profoundly. The terror not of failure itself, but of failing to meet external expectations. It was a fear Catherine knew intimately, having lived with it throughout her own childhood, under Lorenzo's exacting standards. Sophie, listen to me, she said firmly. Your value doesn't come from being exceptional. It comes from being you exactly as you are. But everyone says I'm gifted, special, different. Sophie's voice dropped to a whisper. What if they're wrong? Then you'd still be the amazing Sophie Bennett, who loves languages and ice cream and helping people understand each other, Catherine replied. The test scores and language abilities, those are things you can do, not who you are. The distinction seemed to register with Sophie, her breathing steadying further. Mom says the same thing, but sometimes I still feel like I have to be perfect, or everyone will be disappointed. I understand that feeling better than you know, Catherine told her, thinking of her own decades-long quest for Lorenzo's elusive approval. But I've learned something important recently. Disappointing others is sometimes necessary to be true to yourself. By the time Sarah arrived, breathless from rushing from her job, Sophie had calmed considerably. The school agreed to make the presentation optional rather than mandatory, acknowledging the unnecessary pressure it placed on the young student. As they left the school together, Sarah squeezed Catherine's hand gratefully. "Thank you for coming so quickly. She asked for you specifically, said you would understand because you had the same thing happen once." Catherine smiled, touched by Sophie's perception. "She's right, I did." "About this morning," Sarah continued hesitantly, "Michael and I talked about next steps. We're going to try the casual introduction this weekend, if you'd be willing to help facilitate." "Of course," Catherine agreed immediately. "My apartment is available if you need neutral territory." "Actually," Sarah said, "we were thinking the park near your place. Somewhere public but relaxed where Sophie can feel comfortable. Michael mentioned bringing a model of a building he's designing, something to break the ice with her." Catherine nodded, approving the thoughtful approach. "Perfect." That evening, as Catherine prepared a simple dinner in her modest kitchen, she found herself reflecting on the day's events. Claire's visit had highlighted the stark contrast between the path Catherine had chosen and the one she had abandoned. Her sister remained trapped in Lorenzo's web of control and manipulation, while Catherine, despite the financial and social costs, had found a kind of freedom she'd never experienced before. The realization brought both sadness and determination. Sadness for the sister still bound by golden chains, and determination to never again surrender her autonomy, regardless of the consequences. Her phone rang, an unknown Philadelphia number. Assuming it might be Michael with questions about the weekend plan, she answered to find a different male voice entirely. "Ms. Morgan, this is Detective James Wilson, Philadelphia Police Department. I'm calling regarding Michael Reynolds." A cold weight settled in Catherine's stomach. "What about him?" "There's an outstanding warrant for his arrest in connection with identity fraud and abandonment of public office," the detective explained. "We received an anonymous tip that he's been in contact with you regarding a child custody situation." Catherine's mind raced, immediately recognizing her father's hand in this new development. "Detective, I believe there's been a misunderstanding. Mr. Reynolds legally changed his name years ago, and any allegations of fraud are likely misrepresentations." "Nevertheless, we're obligated to investigate," the detective replied. "If you have current contact information for Mr. Reynolds, I strongly encourage you to share it." "I'll need to consult my attorney before providing any information," Catherine responded smoothly, falling back on corporate training. "You can expect a call from them tomorrow." After ending the call, Catherine immediately contacted Michael to warn him. "My father is escalating," she explained after describing the detective's inquiry. "This is how he operates, finding legal pressure points to force compliance." "But I haven't done anything illegal," Michael protested. "The name change was fully documented. I left my position at the city planning office with proper notice." "Truth is irrelevant to Lorenzo," Catherine explained grimly. "What matters is creating enough legal entanglement to achieve his objective. In this case, preventing your reunion with Sophie, and by extension, punishing me for defying him." The situation demanded immediate action. Catherine called Edward Pierce, leveraging their long professional relationship to gain insight into Lorenzo's strategy. The attorney initially hedged, citing client confidentiality, but Catherine's implicit threat to expose Morgan Global's questionable practices eventually loosened his tongue. "Lorenzo's concerned about potential inheritance claims," Edward finally admitted. "If this child is legitimately connected to both you and this man you once had a relationship with, it creates a bloodline link to Morgan assets that could complicate succession planning." The revelation stunned Catherine. "Sophie has no biological connection to me whatsoever." "Lorenzo believes otherwise," Edward replied carefully. "He's convinced you're concealing a past pregnancy, that this child is actually yours, placed with the cleaning woman to hide the scandal of an unsuitable father. The absurdity of the theory would have been laughable if it weren't so dangerous in Lorenzo's hands." "That's completely delusional," Catherine stated flatly. "Perhaps," Edward conceded, "but Lorenzo has convinced himself it's the only explanation for your unprecedented behavior. Why else would Catherine Morgan, heir to billions, throw away everything for a random child?" The question hung between them, one Catherine had asked herself in quieter moments. Why had Sophie affected her so profoundly? What had compelled her to risk everything for this particular child? "Because she needed someone to see her value beyond her utility," Catherine finally answered. something I never had. Edward sighed heavily. Catherine, be careful. Lorenzo won't stop until he neutralizes what he perceives as a threat to his legacy. After ending the call, Catherine stood at her window, watching darkness settle over the city. The situation had escalated beyond anything she had anticipated. Her father's paranoia, creating a web of legal complications that threatened not just her new life, but Michael's freedom and Sophie's stability. For the first time since walking away from Morgan Global, Catherine felt genuine fear. Not for herself, but for the makeshift family she had helped to reconnect. Lorenzo Morgan had unlimited resources and decades of experience destroying obstacles to his will. Catherine had only her wits, rapidly dwindling savings, and the truth, historically, an insufficient arsenal against her father's machinations. She needed a strategy, something that would neutralize Lorenzo's leverage permanently. As she considered options, Catherine realized with startling clarity that she had been playing defense when the situation demanded offense. Years of corporate battles had taught her that the most effective counter to an aggressive opponent was not retreat, but advance. Lorenzo believed he was protecting the Morgan legacy from contamination. Perhaps it was time to make him understand exactly what that legacy had become and what it stood to lose through his relentless pursuit of control. Catherine opened her laptop and began drafting a document that would either secure their freedom or destroy her last remaining bridges to her former life. The choice was clear, the stakes unprecedented. But for the first time in her life, Catherine Morgan was fighting for something more valuable than money or position. She was fighting for the family she had chosen rather than the one she had been born into, and that made all the difference. Saturday morning arrived with perfect autumn clarity, crisp air, golden sunlight, and the vibrant palette of changing leaves in the park near Catherine's apartment. She arrived early, selecting a bench with good visibility of the playground and open areas where families gathered. The peaceful setting belied the tumultuous events of the preceding days and the high-stakes confrontation she had set in motion for later that afternoon. Michael arrived next, carrying an architectural model protected in a clear display case. His nervous energy was palpable as he paced near the bench, rehearsing opening lines under his breath. Catherine watched him with sympathy, remembering their brief relationship years earlier. His earnest ambition, creative passion, and fundamental decency had attracted her then, qualities that now made him the father Sophie deserved to know. "They're coming," Catherine alerted him, spotting Sarah and Sophie approaching along the tree-lined path. Sophie skipped ahead, her backpack bouncing with each step, unaware of the momentous meeting about to occur. "Miss Catherine," Sophie called, rushing forward for a hug. "Mom said you're bringing a friend who designs buildings. Is that him?" She pointed directly at Michael, who stood frozen, seeing his daughter up close for the first time. "Yes, this is Mr. Reynolds," Catherine confirmed, maintaining the agreed-upon introduction plan. "He's an architect working on some special school designs, and I thought you might find his work interesting." Sophie approached Michael without hesitation, her natural curiosity overriding any shyness. "Do you design schools for gifted kids? Because my school doesn't really know what to do with me." Michael laughed, the tension in his shoulders easing slightly. "Actually, I do specialize in educational spaces. Would you like to see a model of my current project?" As Sophie examined the intricate architectural model, exclaiming over details and asking surprisingly technical questions, Sarah and Catherine exchanged meaningful glances. The physical resemblance between father and daughter was unmistakable. The same expressive eyes, the identical furrow of concentration between their brows as they discussed design principles. "She has his hands," Sarah whispered, watching Sophie's long fingers trace the miniature structures. "I always wondered where those pianist's fingers came from." The planned casual meeting extended naturally, evolving from architecture discussion to a walk through the park, then to impromptu language lessons when Sophie discovered Michael spoke conversational Italian from his architectural studies in Florence. By lunchtime, they had settled at a small cafe, Sophie chattering comfortably with the new friend, who somehow seemed familiar in ways she couldn't articulate. Catherine observed the emerging family dynamic with both joy and a tinge of melancholy. In creating space for their reunion, she had become simultaneously essential and peripheral, a catalyst for their healing, but not truly part of the family unit being reconstructed. "I have a meeting this afternoon," Catherine mentioned as they finished lunch. "Will you all be okay continuing without me?" Actually, Sarah began hesitantly, there's something important we need to discuss with Sophie, and we'd like you to be part of it. Catherine understood immediately. They were ready for the truth. Are you sure? Today might be too soon. Michael and Sarah exchanged a look of shared determination. We've already lost 8 years, Michael replied. I don't want to lose another day pretending to be just a friendly architect. They returned to Catherine's apartment, where the adults created a comfortable setting for the conversation that would forever alter Sophie's understanding of her family. Catherine prepared hot chocolate, Sophie's favorite, while Sarah and Michael arranged themselves on the sofa, leaving space between them for their daughter. Sophie, Sarah began gently when they were all settled. Remember how you've asked me questions about your dad over the years, and I always said he wasn't able to be part of our lives. Sophie nodded, suddenly serious, her perceptive gaze shifting between the adults. You said he had to go away before I was born. I thought that was true, Sarah continued carefully, but I was wrong. There was a misunderstanding, a very big one, that kept your father from knowing where we were or that you had been born. Sophie's focus sharpened, her exceptional mind quickly processing the implications. She turned to Michael, studying his face with new intensity. Are you my dad? Michael nodded, emotion rendering him momentarily speechless. He's been looking for us for years, Sophie, Sarah explained, showing her daughter the folder of search documents and inquiries they had prepared. He never stopped trying to find you. Sophie absorbed this revelation with remarkable composure, examining the evidence of Michael's 8-year search with methodical thoroughness. Catherine recognized the child's analytical approach, processing emotional information through factual verification, a technique Sophie often employed when confronting complex situations. You have my eyes, Sophie finally said to Michael, and we both talk with our hands. I noticed that earlier. Michael smiled through tears. Yes, we do. Are you going to live with us now? Sophie asked, the practical question reflecting a child's straightforward priorities. The adults exchanged glances. We're going to figure things out step by step, Sarah assured her. But yes, your father wants to be part of our lives from now on, if that's okay with you. Sophie considered this seriously. I have questions first. Of course, Michael agreed immediately. What followed was perhaps the most extraordinary father-daughter interview ever conducted. Sophie's questions ranging from practical, what's your favorite food, to philosophical, do you think learning languages changes how people think, to directly personal, will you be disappointed if I make mistakes? Michael answered each question with thoughtful honesty, his responses gradually building Sophie's trust. Catherine watched the process with admiration, recognizing in Sophie's methodical approach the same strategic thinking that had made Catherine successful in business negotiations. One more question, Sophie said, looking suddenly vulnerable. Why did Mom think you didn't want us? The atmosphere tensed as Michael carefully explained the deception that had separated them, with Sarah adding context about the convincing nature of the fraud. Though they avoided directly implicating Lorenzo Morgan, agreeing beforehand that such complexity was unnecessary for Sophie to understand immediately, Catherine felt the weight of her father's manipulation hanging unspoken in the air. Sophie processed this information with remarkable maturity. So someone lied to keep our family apart, she summarized. That was wrong. Very wrong, Catherine agreed quietly. Sophie turned to her, tilting her head in the gesture that often preceded her most insightful observations. Is that why you helped us find each other? Because you knew about the lie? Catherine hesitated, unsure how to explain her complicated role in the situation. I wanted to help make things right, she said simply. Sophie nodded, accepting this. Then, with the adaptability unique to children, she shifted focus entirely. Can we get ice cream to celebrate finding my dad? The tension broken, they laughed in collective relief. As Sarah and Michael prepared to take Sophie for the requested celebration, Catherine begged off, citing her upcoming meeting. In truth, she needed emotional distance, space to prepare for the confrontation she had arranged with her father. After they left, Catherine changed into her most formal business attire, armor for the battle ahead. The document she had prepared lay ready on her desk, its contents representing both nuclear option and potential peace treaty. She reviewed it one final time before sliding it into a leather portfolio, the same one she had carried to countless high-stakes negotiations throughout her career. At precisely 3 o'clock, Catherine arrived at the Morgan Global Investments headquarters. The security staff, recognizing her despite her months-long absence, allowed her entry with evident confusion. In the elevator ascending to the executive floor, Catherine centered herself with the calm determination that had once made her Lorenzo's most formidable protégé. Lorenzo's assistant attempted to intercept her, protesting that Mr. Morgan was in a closed meeting. But Catherine walked past with the authority of someone who still belonged in these hallways. She opened the boardroom door without knocking, interrupting what appeared to be a strategy session with the senior leadership team, including Claire, who looked up in shock at her sister's unexpected appearance. "This meeting is adjourned," Catherine announced with quiet authority. "I need the room." To her mild surprise, the executives, many of whom had been her colleagues for decades, responded to her command by gathering their materials and filing out. Only Claire hesitated, glancing between Catherine and Lorenzo with uncertainty. "You too, Claire," Lorenzo directed sharply. "I'll handle this." When the room had emptied, father and daughter faced each other across the polished expanse of the boardroom table. Lorenzo appeared older than when Catherine had last seen him. The months of her absence had deepened the lines around his eyes, though his posture remained rigidly upright. "Bold of you to come here," he observed coldly. "I assume financial reality has finally set in." Catherine placed her portfolio on the table between them. "Not quite. I'm here to end this, once and for all." Lorenzo's expression didn't change, but his eyes narrowed slightly, the only tell he ever displayed when caught off guard. "End what exactly?" "Your interference in my life, your harassment of Sarah Bennett and Michael Reynolds, your delusional conspiracy theories about Sophie's parentage." Lorenzo dismissed this with a wave. "I protect Morgan interests. If that requires examining threats to our legacy, so be it." "That's the problem," Catherine replied evenly. "You've confused control with protection, manipulation with leadership." "Spare me the philosophical awakening," Lorenzo scoffed. "What do you want?" Catherine slid the portfolio across the table. "This is a comprehensive agreement, my terms for permanent separation from Morgan Global Investments and the family trust." Lorenzo didn't open the document, studying Catherine instead. "You've already separated yourself. What more could you possibly want?" "Legal immunity for Michael Reynolds against the fraudulent charges your lawyers are manufacturing," Catherine stated flatly. "Permanent cessation of all investigations and interference regarding Sarah Bennett's employment history and immigration status, and a clean severance of my remaining financial entanglements with Morgan Holdings." "And why would I agree to any of this?" Lorenzo asked, though his tone suggested he already anticipated her answer. Catherine maintained steady eye contact. "Because the alternative is the immediate release of the documentation I've prepared regarding Morgan Global's more questionable business practices over the past 20 years. Tax structures in the Cayman subsidiaries, the Indonesian labor violations, the systematic suppression of environmental impact data from the Australian mining investments." Lorenzo's face remained impassive, but a muscle twitched in his jaw. "You would destroy your own family's legacy." "No," Catherine corrected him. "I would expose what that legacy has actually become under your leadership. The choice is yours whether to accept a private resolution or risk public scrutiny." For several long moments, Lorenzo said nothing, weighing options with the calculated precision that had built his empire. Finally, he opened the portfolio, scanning the document's terms with practiced efficiency. "You're asking for nothing," he observed, reaching the financial terms. "No ongoing support, no trust fund access, not even your personal art collection from the family properties." "I'm asking for freedom," Catherine clarified, "for myself and for the people you've targeted because of me." Lorenzo studied her with new intensity. "You genuinely care about this cleaning woman and her child?" "Sarah and Sophie," Catherine corrected him again. "And yes, I do." "Why?" The question held genuine bewilderment rather than his usual calculated manipulation. "What could they possibly offer that compares to everything you've sacrificed?" Catherine considered how to explain something so fundamental to someone who had spent a lifetime measuring human value in terms of utility and advantage. "They reminded me who I was before you convinced me that worth only comes from achievement, before I started seeing people as either assets or obstacles." Lorenzo's expression hardened. "Sentimentality is a luxury for those who haven't built something worth protecting. What exactly are you protecting, Father? Catherine challenged. A family that fears you? Children who compete for your approval? Wealth that's never enough? Power that's never secure? Something flickered across Lorenzo's features. Perhaps recognition, perhaps regret, quickly suppressed. He returned his attention to the document, initialing each page with mechanical precision before signing the final page. This concludes our business relationship, he stated formally, sliding the signed agreement back across the table. The family relationship ended the day you walked away from your responsibilities. Catherine accepted the document, a wave of unexpected emotion tightening her throat. Despite everything, some childish part of her had still hoped for understanding, if not reconciliation. Was I ever anything more than an asset to you? She asked quietly. Lorenzo met her gaze, his expression unreadable. You were my greatest achievement, until you weren't. The answer, though painful, provided its own form of closure. Catherine gathered the signed agreement and stood to leave. At the door, she paused for a final glance at the man who had shaped her life through both his strengths and his fundamental failures. Goodbye, Father. The journey from the Morgan building to her apartment passed in a blur of emotional release. By the time Catherine reached her neighborhood, evening had fallen, the streetlights illuminating paths through the local park where families strolled, unburdened by the corporate battles and dynastic pressures that had defined her former world. Her phone chimed with a message from Sarah. We're at the cafe near your place. Sophie insists you join us for dessert to complete the family meeting, as she calls it. Catherine smiled, her steps lightening as she changed direction toward the cafe. Through the window, she spotted them at a corner table, Michael and Sophie building something with sugar packets, while Sarah watched with evident contentment. They looked up as the bell above the door announced her arrival, Sophie waving enthusiastically. Miss Catherine, I saved you a seat, Sophie called, and the last chocolate lava cake. As Catherine joined them, settling into the chair Sophie had reserved beside her, Michael raised an eyebrow in silent question. Catherine gave a small nod, confirming that her mission had been successful. So, Sarah asked quietly, while Sophie explained her sugar packet architecture to a neighboring table. Is it over? Yes, Catherine confirmed. We've reached an agreement that protects all of us. At what cost to you? Michael asked perceptively. Catherine considered the question. I've formally surrendered my position in the Morgan family, financially, professionally, personally. But in truth, I gave that up months ago. Today just made it official. Sophie returned her attention to their table. Mom says we have more news. Are we getting a dog? Please say we're getting a dog. The adults laughed, tension dissipating. Not a dog, Sarah corrected gently, but we do have something important to discuss. Michael leaned forward. Sophie, now that we've found each other, your mom and I have been talking about creating a more permanent family arrangement. We're going to start spending regular time together, all of us, to see how that works. Like a trial period? Sophie asked practically. Exactly like that, Sarah confirmed. And part of that means your dad will be moving to New York, to an apartment not far from ours. Sophie processed this information with her characteristic thoroughness. Will I have two homes then? For now, you'll still live primarily with your mom, Michael explained. But you'll spend time at my place regularly, and maybe if everything works well, we might all live together someday. Sophie nodded, satisfied with this logical progression. Then she turned to Catherine with sudden concern. But what about you? You're part of our family now too. The simple declaration caught Catherine off guard, emotion welling unexpectedly. Sarah reached across the table to squeeze her hand. Catherine will always be part of our lives, she assured Sophie. She brought us all together. Like a fairy godmother, Sophie decided, except with business suits instead of a wand. As they laughed together, Catherine felt a sense of belonging she had never experienced in the rarefied world of the Morgans, a connection based not on achievement or advantage, but on genuine care and mutual support. Later that evening, as Catherine walked home alone, her phone rang with Claire's number. She answered with some trepidation, unsure what to expect after the confrontation with Lorenzo. It's done then? Claire asked without preamble. Yes, Catherine confirmed. I've officially exited the Morgan orbit. Claire was silent for a moment. Father announced it at the emergency board meeting. Effective immediately, I'm assuming all your former responsibilities. Her voice carried a mixture of triumph and uncertainty. "Congratulations," Catherine said sincerely. "You've worked hard for this." "Have I?" Claire questioned unexpectedly. "Or have I just followed the path of least resistance?" The rare moment of self-reflection from her usually certain sister surprised Catherine. "What's really on your mind, Claire?" A heavy sigh came through the line. "You were right earlier. I can't remember the last time I did something simply because it brought me joy." She paused. "Is it worth it? This new life you've chosen?" Catherine thought of the evening she'd just spent. The laughter, the genuine connections, the freedom to follow her own moral compass, without calculation. "It's not easier," she answered honestly, "but it's more real. And yes, it brings joy in ways I'd forgotten were possible." Another long silence followed. "I don't think I can do what you did," Claire finally admitted. "Walk away from everything." "You don't have to make the same choices I did," Catherine assured her, "but maybe start by making some choices for yourself, not for Lorenzo's approval." "Perhaps," Claire allowed, her voice returning to its more familiar professional tone. "I should go. Early strategy meeting tomorrow." "Claire," Catherine said, before her sister could disconnect, "my door is always open to you. Remember that." The following weeks brought a cascade of adjustments as their unconventional family unit took shape. Michael secured an apartment within walking distance of Sarah's place, creating a second home where Sophie spent increasing amounts of time. Catherine remained a steady presence, helping navigate educational decisions and providing support as the parents cautiously rebuilt their relationship. Sophie blossomed under the combined attention, her exceptional abilities nurtured without becoming the sole focus of her identity. The specialized educational program they designed balanced academic challenge with normal childhood experiences. Language competitions interspersed with soccer practice, advanced mathematics alongside art classes, where Sophie delighted in creating imperfect, joyful messes. 3 months after the confrontation with Lorenzo, Catherine received an unexpected letter. Elegant stationery bearing her mother's distinctive handwriting. Marianne Morgan had maintained silence since Catherine's departure from the family, presumably following Lorenzo's directive to cut all contact. The letter was brief but significant. "Your father will never admit it, but he keeps the newspaper clipping about Sophie's linguistics award on his desk. Some legacies aren't measured in stock portfolios. I miss you, Mom." Catherine smiled at this small evidence that even Lorenzo's iron control had limits, that perhaps some genuine human connection remained beneath his calculating exterior. She tucked the letter away, neither responding nor discarding it. A bridge neither burned nor crossed, but preserved for some future possibility. On a crisp December afternoon, Catherine sat in the audience of a small university auditorium, watching Sophie deliver a presentation at the Young Linguists Symposium. Sarah and Michael flanked her, their shared pride palpable as their daughter confidently addressed scholars and educators 3 times her age. "Language isn't just words," Sophie explained to the rapt audience. "It's how we build bridges between different worlds. When I learned Italian from watching cooking videos, I wasn't just memorizing vocabulary. I was connecting to another way of seeing life." Catherine glanced at Michael, noting how he beamed at his daughter's poised presentation, then at Sarah, who watched with tears of pride shimmering in her eyes. The journey that had brought them all together, from that first panic attack in a corporate boardroom to this moment of shared achievement, seemed both improbable and somehow inevitable. As applause erupted following Sophie's conclusion, Catherine felt her phone vibrate with an incoming email. The sender surprised her. Claire Morgan with subject line, "Thinking of you." The message contained no text, just an attachment, a photograph of their grandmother's painting that had once hung in Catherine's office, with a simple note, "This belongs with you. I'll find a way to get it to you." This small act of rebellion against Lorenzo's dictates represented more courage from Claire than most would recognize. Catherine understood it for what it was, the first tentative step toward her sister's own independence, inspired perhaps by Catherine's more dramatic break. After the symposium, they celebrated at Sophie's favorite restaurant, a family tradition now firmly established. As they shared stories and laughter, Catherine observed the bonds strengthening between them all, not just the biological connections between Sophie and her parents, but the chosen connections that had formed through shared experiences and mutual support. "Ms. Catherine," Sophie said suddenly, "are you happy now, without all your money and important meetings?" The direct question, delivered with a child's unfiltered curiosity, brought conversation at the table to a momentary halt. Catherine considered her answer carefully. "I'm happier than I've been in a very long time," she replied truthfully. "I have less, but I've gained more." Sophie nodded sagely. "That's what I thought. You smile with your eyes now, not just your mouth." Later that evening, as Catherine walked home through gently falling snow, she reflected on the extraordinary chain of events that had transformed her life. Her chance encounter with a gifted child during a moment of weakness had catalyzed profound change. Not just for Sophie, whose potential might otherwise have gone unrecognized, but for Catherine herself. In walking away from the Morgan legacy of wealth and power, she had discovered a different kind of inheritance, the capacity for genuine connection.